It spoke. After 13 years, the thing finally spoke to me. I'm getting ahead of myself, so I'll start from the beginning. I first saw the thing when I was only 7 years old, the day after a rather painful time with some friends. I had been pushed off the playground and struck a rib on the metal bars, possibly fracturing it, but I never got it checked. Anyways, this isn't about my crappy friends, but of a creature that has followed me no matter where my family moved. At first, I thought the trailer we lived in was the thing that was haunted, but when we moved and it followed, I knew it was me. No matter what I did and no matter where I went, it would always find me and follow me. I'm getting off track. It was like any other morning for me. Bright and sunny, small clouds in the sky, and the bark of my dog as he stared out the window, looking over our yard. I gave him a smile as I walked into our living room and said, "Good morning, Boris. Who's a good boy?" I petted his head, but to my surprise, he didn't react. He was still just looking out the window with an unbreaking stare on something I couldn't see. At least not yet. My smile faded slightly as I said, "Hey, what's wrong, boy?" As I looked out the window, and I finally noticed the thing in my yard. It's been a while, so I don't remember everything about the first sighting, but I do remember it looked very humanoid. It was more of a silhouette of someone, and at first, I thought it was a shadow. And then it began to walk, and I noticed it move the tall grass like when I walked on it. The only thing I know for certain was it was a male, and it had a more masculine physique. I stared at the shadow man for a solid few seconds along with my dog, and then I turned to my dad as he walked into the room and told him what I saw. I looked back out the window, expecting to see it before it had reached the gate, but it was gone without a trace. My dad chuckled and said something about me having an overactive imagination, but I knew what I saw, and what I kept seeing. Every morning, through snowstorms and heavy rains, I would see the shadow walk through my yard without fail. I did a little bit of research and found that seeing a shadow man was a sign your home was haunted. So I tried again to tell my parents, but they still thought nothing of it and waved it away. After 2 years of seeing him, it just became something that I was used to, like having breakfast or going to school. Anytime my mom or dad would see me staring out the window and asked what I was doing, I would say something like, "Just enjoying the sunrise," and they would be satisfied. I dealt with whatever it was for just under 6 years, until my family finally had to move because of Dad's job. He was a police officer and he got transferred every few years. As we packed up the truck to leave for our new home, I looked to the gate to the yard, and just before we pulled away, I said, "Goodbye, spirit." As we pulled out of the driveway, however, whatever this thing was decided it wasn't done with me, and it wasn't long until I saw him again. It had been about a year since I last saw the Shadow Man, and I had completely forgot about it as I made friends in my new town. I was almost 13 and I was in middle school when the thing made itself known again in a new way. I was crossing a street on the way to school with a friend when a car entered the intersection, turning right at us. While my friend had jumped out of the way, I suddenly had a vision of the shadow in my old yard, and when I snapped out of it, the truck was a foot, maybe 2 feet away from me. The man in the truck looked terrified, as me and my friends simply continued walking to school. My friends caught up with me and asked how I could look so calm from something like that, and I played it off as though I thought I knew the man would stop. And then it happened again. After school on that same day, on the same street, another car turned into the intersection and nearly hit me, and again I saw a flash of the shadow. It was a sedan this time, but the woman inside had the same look of terror as the man that morning. For the rest of the day, I recalled every instance of seeing the man, but whenever I tried, it was never as detailed as what I saw that day. As soon as I got home, I grabbed a pen and paper and tried to draw its face, but I was never skilled in any kind of drawing or painting, so it was never right. When that failed, I decided writing down a description of it, and that at least gave some ideas to what it looked like. I wrote, "The shadow had no visible hair anywhere on its head. Its face was long and thin, but I can't remember specific details like cheeks or nose. I can't remember if it had visible ears. Its eyes were white, but not a snow white. They were a dull, almost lifeless white. It was cloaked like a medieval monk. Maybe it was a long dead monk. Not the best description, I know, but it was the best an almost teen could do, and for me, it summed it up perfectly." I put the description on my desk, saving it just in case I remembered anything else about its appearance, and then went to the basement to play on my game system. That was when I first noticed something was in my house besides me, Mom, and Dad. We had to get rid of the dog a few years before, since it turned out that I was allergic to it and the doctors had misdiagnosed me as a baby, so there was no chance that it was Boris. I was playing some first-person shooter, I don't remember which one, when I noticed a shadow under the door walk past at the wall on the other side. I turned to the door, only to see another shadow under the door going the opposite way, this time the stairs leading up to the living room. The shadow moved back and forth a few more times before it stopped right in front of the door. After a few seconds of silence, there was a knock on the door and I hesitantly walked up the stairs before quickly opening the door and I found no one there. And then I realized something. I never heard a single footstep as this happened, and our house had super thin floors, so much so as I would be able to hear my parents walking around on the second floor. If a person was walking next to the door less than 20 feet away, I would have heard something. I went to the living room and asked Mom if she had heard or saw anything, but she shook her head and continued watching her show. Now, some of you reading this might be annoyed that I've recounted every individual event, but I'll move us along a bit. Over the next 7 years, I've nearly been hit by cars 24 times. Each time the drivers had a look of horror and flashes of the Shadow Man always accompanied him. The Shadow Man has made himself known to me more now, even revealing more of his appearance. I now have added more to my description and have a clearer image of the thing following me. Its nose is thin, much like his face, and does not extend far from his face. He did have ears, but they were very nearly fused to his head, hence why I never noticed them. And lastly, he had black teeth you would never see unless it let you. To my surprise, the fact I knew its face actually made me slightly more afraid of it than before. I was never one to be scared. Hell, since I was young, I've loved horror movies and I've never had a nightmare after watching them. But this thing, the fact that it proved spirits and ghosts existed and one is haunting me, it scared me more than anything. And a while I grew used to it again. I was startled whenever I noticed him actually in the house now. I also grew annoyed at his continued following of me to the point that I tried to summon a demon to try and get rid of him, but it didn't work. Now I should probably get to the actual part when he spoke. So, let's talk about it. I've been dealing with him for 13 years and I'm currently a college student living in residency and just trying to get by. Even here, I'm not able to escape his bothersome following. And just 8 days, hours ago, I got drunk and finally snapped angrily. "Why don't you just leave me alone? I'm sick of you." And I threw my beer can at the shadow. To my shock, it raised a hand and caught the can, making me sit up straight as it placed it down next to him. And then, for the first time in over a decade, he spoke to me. His voice was rough and slow, like that of someone who was dehydrated, and emanated a feeling of dread I never knew. He said, "How sad. For all I have done for you, you treat me like a nuisance, like a pimple that won't go away." I very quickly sobered up from his words, and I asked, "What are you talking about? All you've done is haunt me and damn near make every car hit me. How the heck are you not a nuisance?" I was standing now, but it slowly moved closer to me and I sat back down as I said, "Child, I have not caused those vehicles to come near you. I'm the one who saved you." As my eyes widened at what he said, I asked, "What do you mean?" He backed up again and said, "Did you see the faces of the people after they stopped? Did you notice the fear they wore?" I nodded slowly, and he elaborated, "That was my doing. I made them see me, the true me, so they would stop. I've saved your life over a dozen times, and all I get from you is fear and hatred." I looked down, feeling guilty that I never considered he was simply helping me and looking for thanks. I guess not all spirits are bad, like the movies say. But I was interrupted when he said, "And since you have not shown care for my protection, I will leave you, but not before taking something as a price for my services." He backed into the darkness until he was no longer visible, and then I began to hear disgusting noises from the corner of the room. It was the sound of bones breaking and flesh being torn apart, and I tried to plead to him. "No, I'm sorry I never thanked you. I promise. I will never take for granted what you do ever again. Please, just stop the noises." The noises continued, however, and he spoke again, though his voice was shifting into something inhuman. "It's too late. You did not care for the work I've done. For the life you have is because of me. And for that..." He paused as he returned from the shadow, revealing what I assumed to be his true self. What I saw was a creature other people would describe as nightmarish. He was no longer robed, and he did not stand on 2 feet, but on both hands and feet. His skin was no longer like the void, but whitish-gray without a hair on it. What terrified me was his face, however, which had twisted so his mouth was where his forehead was. His teeth were razor-sharp, and in a voice that gave no hint of being human, he finished, "Then I will simply take it from you." The thing lunged at me, and I shouted aloud, "No!" before shooting up from bed, sweating profusely and an empty beer can in my hand. I looked around the room, finding no sign the creature was here, and gave a sigh of relief as I said, "No more drinking before bed," and fell asleep again. Over the next few days, I did things as I usually did. I didn't see a single instance that the shadow was still following me. I smiled, happy to finally be rid of him, and I went back to school a happier me. However, when I talked with my friends, I noticed I didn't care what they were saying, but I brushed it off as me being selfish and only enjoying my happiness that the spirit was gone. That is, until I got a test score back from a teacher. I failed, and it was a big test, so this would usually hit me pretty hard. But somehow, I simply didn't care. The only reason I knew this was odd was because I remembered when I had failed something last week. I almost had an anxiety attack. I simply picked up the test, and when class was over, I put it in my bag and I walked home. Not a care in sight. When I was home, I realized I didn't even care that I didn't care. like I couldn't be bothered. I felt so conflicted in my mind about what to do since I didn't care, that I was on the verge of just shutting down until I remember the words the creature spoke in the dream. I repeated, "You did not care for the work I've done, for the life you have is because of me, and for that, then I will simply take it from you." It took a few seconds, but I finally realized what he meant. In the dream, I believed he meant he would take my life, but it seems he meant something far more appropriate. It seems he took away my ability to care about anything anymore, which I actually chuckled at. I went to my laptop, slightly interested in what it's called. And I guess I am now classified as a sociopath now. I shrugged that off, and yesterday, it was the same. Not a care in the world for anything. I guess if there's a reason to why I'm typing this and sharing it, it would be to tell you to appreciate your spirits. You have no idea what they can do to you if you don't appreciate them. Oh, and one more thing. I vaguely remember this from a dream as I've typed this, and it may be important, so here it is. Just as the creature lunged at me in the dream, I think I may have learned its name. If I'm correct, it was Magnosko.